to see all of your faces and hear all of your amazing ideas. And I'm also excited to be, particularly to be in Los Angeles County Public Defender's Office. As many of you know, we are the largest and oldest office in the nation. And we have been at this work for 100 years, literally 100 years. And in this moment, not only is the nation having a moment, but LA County is having a moment. A couple of years ago, we were lucky enough to steal away Ricardo Garcia from San Diego. And he became the first Latinx public defender in our county's history. And he is at the helm of the largest ship pushing this agenda forward. We were lucky in that over the years, we've had public defenders who have been a little bit removed from the courtroom. But Ricardo came basically straight from the courtroom to lead this office. And that perspective has been incredibly meaningful at this moment. Having been the attorney on the longest ever death penalty trial in California history, he knows all too well what lawyers deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so we're lucky to have him and to have his vision leading this office at this time in our history. Without further ado, Mr. Garcia, take it away.
Thank you, Tiffany. That was a very nice introduction. Good afternoon, all of you. I'm adjusting to these screens. As Tiffany said, you would think that after so many video conferences, we'd have this down, but I think now we're all suffering from a little bit of video fatigue as our eyes dart around trying to catch every single name or person on the screen and remember and not look at ourselves, right? But it really is an honor to be here, and I want to thank Pepperdine for hosting this event and for giving me a chance to come here and talk to all of you. Really, one of my favorite things to do as the public defender is to have the chance to talk to students, because you are in every sense of the word the future of this profession. For those of you who choose to become public defenders, and really the future of criminal defense and justice reform. I'm a strong believer, and I've said this before, that time moves us forward, not backwards. And so those of us in the profession today should seek to be more like those of you coming into the profession than you to be like us. Because your visions, your ideas, your dreams are what are going to change how we do our work tomorrow. And the sooner I can embrace that and learn from that and make that part of what we do in this department, I think the faster we'll move in the right direction. Nothing can be more true than what Tiffany just talked about, a very unique moment in time. I've lived through different moments of social change and social movement in Los Angeles, in the United States, some more significant than others. I studied social movements when I was in college at Santa Cruz, and I've always been engaged and very concerned about how we move from where we are today and have been in the past and stagnant that way into real inclusive community and society that stares at and calls the systemic racism of the current system what it is and not try to sugarcoat it in what we wish it was. And it feels different now. It feels different because the normal steps to placate people's anger are not working. It's not working just to say, we're going to reduce the funding to the LAPD, or we're going to cut the school police department down. People aren't saying, okay, that's enough, we're walking away, everything's fixed. They're saying that that's simply what I would call the exterior fix. That's like saying there's going to be no more chokeholds. That's great, important, but it doesn't change the systemic problems that we see. It doesn't get into the fundamental culture. We're beginning to see a conversation that says when it comes to law enforcement, that we have to change the warrior culture of us and them. And until we change that, then these other actions, while important, are short-lived. We find ourselves moving backwards. We're seeing a need to look at how we reward law enforcement behavior, which traditionally has been a reward of those individuals who dive in first, right? And as opposed to rewarding the individuals who maybe step back and problem solve. And so when we look at changing the culture and the presumptions that we have about the two sides in the communication, then we'll see real systemic change. And that conversation has not ended as it might have done in the past with the first olive branches offered by the bureaucracies. And so I'm excited about that. And I think it is an exciting time. And I think what's great is I hope all of you are engaging in those conversations, not just academically, but really with your parents, with your friends on the street, wearing masks, of course, because we are in a unique time, and I'll talk about that. So when I was asked to talk about what our vision is and what we are here in the Public Defender's Office of Los Angeles, I thought if I could talk, maybe I would talk a little bit about myself and my own story, but I may leave that to questions. What I want to talk about is where we're going. We recently, for the first time in decades, developed a strategic plan for the office, and we did that in a unique way. We did that by bringing people from across the department together. You have two of the participants here to learn what it was that the lawyers and the staff and the people that work here wanted and envisioned for the future, and what we thought as a group, as a collective, was important for the Public Defender's Office. What could we own? And so from that, we came up with our vision, because that's what I was asked, what is our vision? What is my vision? And I think it's important for me to say my vision, it's not just my vision. It can't be. I have 1,200 people that work with me who all have ideas and beliefs about what they want the office to look like. And it has to be something that we want together for it to be successful. Otherwise, it falls short. It becomes a central point, and it's only as important as the individual that sits in this chair. And the institution is more important than that. So the Los Angeles County Public Defender's Office is the finest client-centered criminal defense firm in the nation. Why is it important for us to be the finest criminal defense firm in the nation? Because the image for decades has been that public defenders are somehow less than private representation, that somehow we are not lawyers. And so we are, and it must be announced without hesitation, that we are the finest, not just public defenders, but we do the finest criminal representation anywhere. And that is who we are. We are also providing a beacon for client-centered revolutionary and evolutionary change in the criminal justice system. What does that mean? Client-centered is the buzzword now. Client-centered means that the people we represent, we work for them. It's as simple as that. They are our clients. We are theirs. And they, even if we are being paid separately, they are the people that we are beholden to. Revolutionary and evolutionary, or evolution and revolutionary change. There's so much that could be said about that, but the part I want to focus on is what's happening today in the office, which is our case management system. You would think that the oldest and largest public defender's office would have the most advanced case management system in the country. Well, we didn't have one really. We were almost just getting away from chisels and stone tablets when I arrived. But by the end of next month, this month, we'll be able to launch what I think is going to be the most advanced case management and communication system in criminal defense anywhere in the country. It'll be a system that will allow the lawyers to work virtually, that the trappings of traditional work with paper, I still use it, it causes us to be restricted in how we represent our clients, and the information we have at our fingertips at any given time will be gone. Lawyers will be able to communicate with each other constantly, which we already do with our phones, but now through the system, make requests, read discovery wherever they are. All they'll need is an internet connection and their tablet, their computer. And so that is a change for this department that will fundamentally alter the way we work together as a team. Talk about our mission. By 2025, measurably reduce incarceration and the collateral consequences of contact with the criminal justice system in Los Angeles County. You know, I can almost say that we've already reached that goal since we dropped the population in the jail during the COVID crisis by over 5,000 individuals. And that was done through a collaborative effort, and I'll say led and spearheaded by this office, bringing in the other people, the district attorney and the court and the city attorneys. They didn't come in and the sheriff by themselves and say, hey, let's drop the population. That was not on their lips. The first time we asked them to do that with misdemeanors, they laughed. They thought it was ridiculous for even us to ask that. And after time and pushing and forcing, we are where we are today, which I think is the goal now, is to keep those numbers down and continue to reduce them and show that the population doesn't need to come back up. Our values, which are important to how we do our work. Advocacy, we are zealous defenders working relentlessly to meet the needs of our clients. What does that mean? If you become a public defender in LA, you are a constitutional warrior. I love that phrase, constitutional warrior, because that's what the lawyers do every single day. That's what our staff does, our support team. They build on the idea that we fight for those people who are often not fought for their entire lives. And we know they have value, but we speak that value to others. I'll get to that. We are compassionate. That is, we listen to our clients and respect their life experience and tell their story. And that's so important. No person, as you've probably heard before, is the worst thing they've ever done. And that is such an important thing to remember, because our clients are so often judged, not just factually for what they're accused of, but their entire life being is being judged by one or two events for which they are being accused. We tell a story, and I like to think of it this way. We tell the story that no one ever expects to be told. And we all have those in our lives. It's that story that you do something without expecting recognition for it, and someone finds that and tells it. And we all have had those moments, hopefully in our lives, maybe once, maybe twice, where someone close to us, a family member, a friend, tells that story about something we did that was so kind that we never thought we'd hear, and we get embarrassed to hear it because it's truly a good moment of who we are. And we find those for people who most people think don't even have a moment like that, and we tell that. And that is so important to giving value. Dedication, we are passionate about indigent defense, but not just about representing our clients. We're passionate, these lawyers are passionate about the communities from which our clients come from. So many of the public defenders and the staff that work in this office don't just come here 9 to 5. They are actively engaged in the communities in which they live. They're there at events. They're handing out food and water when necessary. They're going to community events and speaking. And most of the time, they're just listening to what the neighborhood needs to hear, them needs to say. And that is an important part about being a public defender. They're also soldiers for social change. They march on the street. They speak out publicly. They stand for the things that they believe in, not just, again, in the office, but within the communities in which they live. And collaboration. We work with county and community stakeholders to achieve our clients' goals. This is a delicate balance, right? Because we are adversaries at the same time. We're not there to have the stakeholders tell us what our clients need. We're there to tell them what our clients need. And if you can collaborate with us to get there, then we'll work with you. But we never compromise on the values that we believe in and how we are there to represent our clients. So I think it's important. I wanted to share that with you about what we do and what we believe in here in Los Angeles. And I think most public defenders that you'll meet stand for those values and those beliefs. I'm going to circle back now to COVID-19. You know, there really is no playbook, no rule book, no instruction on how to handle and go through that crisis that we're going through now. All of you, I mean, if you would have thought a year ago that you'd be sitting having courses and doing lectures online all the time, or that you would have been told your 4th of July, you can't go to the beach, you can't have a barbecue with a bunch of friends, and you certainly can't set off fireworks, you would have thought that's crazy. But here we are. It's a trying time. It's a difficult time on so many levels, both as a student, professionally, as lawyers, and as family members at home. Those of you who are out of the dorms, if you're undergraduates, or those of you who are law students who are living in your apartments and are now back home with your parents, or you have friends that do that, you never imagined that. I like to say that my wife sits at home and with my two boys, and the worst chemical mixture I can think of is a 9-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 45-year-old woman together every day. I walk in the front door and I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to get. Am I getting nitroglycerin, or is it, you know, a wonderful, hey, let's all go for a family walk? You shake that up every day, and I'm not so confident. And you live that. But I can't say it's all going to be fine for each of us. I can say we're all going to get through this. And within my office, we're all going to get through this together. And as a community, we're all going to get through this together, one day at a time. And so I wanted to share those things to start, but I knew there were questions. And I think the questions are much more important than me just pontificating about my views on things in general. So if there are questions, I'd love to answer those.
I can start.
Please.
Mr. Garcia, how did you get into public service?
Happenstance. No, I'd always sort of worked in public service. When I was younger, I worked in Santa Monica for the Parks and Rec for a bunch of years. And then when I was in college, I worked at family student housing with the kids there. And so I always had a sense of public work, education as the things I wanted to do. And my mother worked at the UC system as a secretary. So I had connections to academia and that kind of thing. That's how I got into it. When I was young, I ended up where I am now as a public defender was I didn't know what I wanted to do. When I was in law school, I wasn't 100% sure. I'll admit now, every time I say this and Tiffany's in the room, I'm worried she might throw something at me. But I thought I wanted to be a prosecutor. Because when I was a kid, I grew up thinking that prosecutors were the cowboys in the white hat and rode the horse in to save everybody. That's how I grew up. That's what I was taught. And as my identity developed in adulthood, and I went to law school and I said that out loud, the people that knew me laughed in my face and you could never be a prosecutor. Do you listen to the arguments you make in crim law? Do you listen to the positions you take over drinks at bar review? You die as a prosecutor. And so
we forgive you. We forgive you. It's
okay. And so over time, I realized this is the work I wanted to do. And San Diego was recruiting when I was at school. I went there and it's the best decision I ever made. And the way I know it's the best decision I ever made is because I was lucky. In 2004, I left to come here to LA from San Diego briefly to work with the ACLU, an incredible institution. For many people, a dream job. And what I realized when I was doing that I already had the dream job. I already had the perfect career, and that was being a public defender. And so I went back to San Diego and I continued that work. And I can say even today, when the alarm goes off in the morning, I hit the snooze button because I want to sleep, not because I don't want to come to work. I love what I do, and I feel fortunate to do it.
And I know we don't have you for much longer, so if the students have any questions, you can drop them in the chat and I'll try to get to them as much as I can.
Sorry about that. You give a lawyer a microphone and we just go on and on and on.
No. I'm trying to be mindful of your time. So how can the students best support the people harmed by mass incarceration, the communities that are harmed? How can they join the fight?
Yeah, I think an important part is educate yourself so that when you're speaking about it, you're speaking from a place of fact and truth and not hyperbole and imagination. That is so critical because when you're speaking about it, everybody's already expecting you to be talking about things that aren't real. And what I mean by that is I remember public defenders are in a unique position because a lot of the things that most people now are seeing on TV or on their feeds about police abuse, physical and verbal, and all the other things we know are real, we've known from the minute we open our first case. You know, you read it if you don't come from an environment where you saw that in your personal life, you read that first case and the client tells you that the cop did X, Y, or Z or lied, and you might say instinctively, oh, that can't be true. Because your psyche doesn't want to accept in a way that the people there that are supposed to have been protecting you when you were a child are really not. But over time, you quickly begin to see that not everybody's making this up, and you see the truth of it. And that's a difficult conversation to have with a lot of people because it shakes the very foundation of their security in their own homes. It shakes the very foundation of the reality that they've grown up believing. And so if you just use grandiose statements and hyperbole to tell that story, it will lose steam very quickly. So educate yourself, know the truth of the stories, and tell those stories every single time you can. And then figure out what your level of involvement is. Are you a person that is a writer? Can you write about it? Are you a marcher? Are you a speaker? What are you? What strengths do you have? And play to those strengths. Don't feel that you have to do what your classmate does, because there's a need for multiple voices and prongs of attack. So that's what I would say.
One student mentioned in the chat that she heard you talk about collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And have you seen more collaboration recently between various parties, such as the DA's office, given the weekly protests against her? And are the courts and the mayor involved in that collaboration as well?
So I think that's a good question. Collaboration is a double-edged word. Are we collaborating at the cost of our clients, or are we cooperating to improve their situation? The DA does collaborate, but there's a limit to how much it can do at this time, and this particular DA is interested or feels capable of doing. And the same thing applies to the courts. The courts are probably the hardest because as an institution, they're designed to move slow. They're designed to not be as impacted by the social change around them. And in some ways we want them to be that, right? We don't want a court to flip-flop every time there's a different political wind in the air, although our current president seems to be trying to make sure that that's the case moving forward. So it's a difficult, because our vision of collaboration is always, we're advocates, it's always on the behalf of our client. We can't compromise that. And so while we'll cooperate and work, it can only be to the extent that we don't feel like that's violating our clients' needs or rights. And that is delicate, because some of the stuff that we could accomplish pushes us very close to that line. And and I guess I'm not really answering the question completely. I guess, has there been more? Yes. Has there been work together to get people out of custody since COVID hit? Yes. Were they motivated by the good nature of their soul and understanding that the criminal justice system needs to be changed? Absolutely not. They were motivated by this idea of COVID-19. And were they motivated or concerned about the clients getting sick in jail? Probably not. They were more motivated by their own staff getting sick, or their own, or the perception that they were doing nothing when other people in the country were doing it. But did that change in them? I can't answer that. Maybe it did, but we did have some good work together in that.
I'll ask this from the pre-printed questions. What is the biggest policy change that you would like to see enacted?
The end of capital punishment. There is nothing else to me that is more important in our criminal justice system today than the abolishment of capital punishment. It is the vestige of slavery in America, because what it does is it validates the murder of a human being who is perceived to have violated an institutional rule. And it does that by the government. And to me, it is vile. And I think it's the reason why I believe it needs to be beyond that eradicated is that it's really easy to talk about the person that we think of as either factually innocent or has a disability and therefore shouldn't be executed, right? But it shouldn't exist for the person who we know has committed the most violent and terrible crimes. When the Golden State Killer, just this week, I think it was, beginning of the week or the end of last week, was given life without parole. That is the person, that is the example of why it shouldn't exist. That person should never, even he should never be confronting the death penalty. So that is my single, that one thing.
You also had, like I mentioned in your intro, the longest death penalty trial in our state's history, and you were successful, I might add. Um, how do you balance self-care? How did that affect your life personally, having that extensive, extremely exhausting experience?
That's an excellent question, Tiffany. And in fact, I think it's really relevant today for all of us going through this crisis with COVID. Because how do we balance all this stress? I think you have to have self-care, and that has to be very individual. And you can't be embarrassed for whatever that is and to admit that you need it. So one of the simple things I do for self-care is I ride a motorcycle. I rode it today. And I ride that motorcycle because for the 20 minutes from my house to here, yeah, I have a short commute in LA, and back, that's my time. I own that time. It doesn't belong to the office. It doesn't belong to my family. It doesn't belong to my friends. It's mine. And I get off that bike and I feel better. I feel fundamentally better. And what I did during this case is I found things like that. So when I first started the case, I was working 12 to 14 hours every weekday and then another 8 hours each Saturday and Sunday. And I did that for 3 months straight. As you can imagine, it was crushing on my family, on myself. I went to a birthday party and there was this little boy who was playing, and he was a nightmare. He was rude to his mother. He was aggressive with the other kids. He was disrespectful to the people whose party it was. And I turned to my wife and I said, "Who is this kid? Where are his parents?" And she looked at me and said, "That's your son, and you are his father." And I had been disconnected by him so much that I wasn't involved in his life for those 3 months. And it affected him. And I didn't want him to continue that way. And so I made a conscious decision. I would be home in time to have dinner with them and tuck them into bed, even if that meant I worked another 5 hours into the night. And on the weekends, I would either work one full day or half day each day. And the time that I wasn't working was for them. And I made that decision. That's the kind of balance. You have to make it, but you have to commit yourself to the balance. You have to say, I am going to do this for myself, and make it a point to do that every day and integrate it into your life. So it's as part of your life as getting up and taking a shower or having that first cup of coffee. You have to make it who you are.
Now, and I don't want to take up
I
your
have
whole
about
lunch hour.
10 more minutes, but
Okay.
I want other people to get a chance. I know that Jimmy and Rachel are here, and I'm confident they have a great perspective as well.
Yeah, maybe I'll take one more while we have you, and then I'll go to Jimmy and Rachel. One of our viewers asked about the protesters. Was the office involved in securing the promise from the various prosecutors that they would not prosecute protesters during the BLM protests?
Yeah, and actually, I have to say it was really almost the single-handed work of Justine Essick, our new chief deputy. She was on the phone with the chief of staff at the DA's office and the chief prosecutor of the city attorney's office, browbeating them about how embarrassed they should be for prosecuting these people who were out expressing their First Amendment rights. So yeah, we were directly involved with that. They tried to use that in some, I will call them shenanigans, but yeah, absolutely. And I'll add something to that. It didn't just include the people who were peaceably protesting. I think it's important to understand that when something like that ignites and people's pent up anger is allowed to be released, well, I don't condone, and I don't think any of us condone, looting and breaking windows and burning police cars. But you have to think about the level of oppression and anger and fear that people are experiencing and have lived with and have bottled up for them to express it in that way. And so I think they are, again, while I don't justify it and I'm not excusing it, I think it mitigates and you have to understand it. And at that time, they are protesting the violence that they've lived with for their lives and that they've seen their their fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters and neighbors lived. And so part of that protection for the protesters, I think, needed to be pushed for those who were engaged in less than peaceable demonstration. All right.
Thank you so much, Mr. Garcia. I really appreciate you giving us your time, your lunch hour.
It's all right. I'm going to sit in for a minute, then check out. I'm going to take notes on what Jimmy and Rachel say.
Okay. I'll start with you, Rachel. Tell us where you went to law school, what made you enter public defense, and where has your career path been so far?
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Rachel Calla. At the end of the meeting, I'm going to put my info in the chat in case you guys have any other questions for me. I'm a misdemeanor attorney in Compton. I went to Pepperdine Law School. I graduated in 2016, and the genesis of my path to public service started when I was a toddler, and I'll explain that in a second, but I am very grateful to Pepperdine for having on-campus interviews, and I'm going to have to ask for Miss Blacknell's forgiveness also when I admit to you that I clerked for the DA's office before I clerked for the public defender's office, but that was part of what led me right where I need to be, which is in this seat right now. My father's a public defender, so I had the good fortune, the absolute privilege of seeing what a public defender looked like at home and in public and at work since I was very little. It was one of my biggest outings to go to court with my dad. I was obsessed with going to court with my father. I loved his office. He had all types of letters from his clients. I would fictionalize letters from clients, write them to my dad. He had all these like mementos from all his cases, and I just thought, obviously, I thought my dad was the coolest person in the world. I still think he's pretty cool. But I actually saw him lawyering when I was little. So then when I made it to law school, which was no surprise to anybody, I kind of was faced with a question of like, what are you going to do? My dad took a backseat. He was not pushy at all. He just said, you got to figure out what you need to do and what you want to do and your vocation. And he actually encouraged me to try the DA's office and the public defender's office. He said that taking on a job as a public defender is one that's going to change your life forever. It's going to change who you are forever. It's going to affect your relationships forever. And it is a mental health accounting that you have to be honest with yourself about at the outset. So I didn't know what that meant yet. And I just was like, okay, I'll check this out. I had a on-campus interview with the DAs. It went swimmingly. It was the most seamless interview I've ever had in my entire life. I had later that day, on-campus interview with the public defenders, and I thought I had bombed it. I felt like a complete idiot. I was like, I answered those questions wrong. Like, I was so intimidated by them, and I was like, there's no way I'm getting this bid for this internship. They were highly coveted, and while I was at the DA's office, I was watching a double murder trial, and I was sitting by myself watching the trial, and I found myself really rooting for the defendant. And the reason why, not because of what he did, I wasn't enamored by that, how sexy that trial was. I saw the DA mishandling the case. I saw the shortcomings of their case and that they weren't going to reach their burden. And I was sitting in the gallery thinking, I think I'm on the wrong side. Thankfully, that was at the end of my internship there. I went to the public defenders. I was 100% certain these were my people, the people that I needed to be working with, fighting with, raging with, and dedicating, finding a way to use my privilege. Like I've had a lifetime of privilege, but this job is the ultimate privilege that I could have never imagined what it would feel like to do this work. So long answer to a short question. That's how I got to the public defender's office.
What about you, Jimmy? What brought you to us? You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You figured after 75 meetings, you get used to it, right? What was your question, Tiff?
What brought you to the public defender's office?
I was a guest in our county's juvenile hall and in our county's county jail. I grew up in a poor area of LA. It was Monterey Park. It's not what it is now. Now it's all dim sum and boba. But back then it was, we bordered East LA, where we heard a lot about the African and the Hispanic gangs. Monterey Park also had an Asian gang epidemic. So I saw the racial profiling and systemic racism that police utilized against my friends, against my family. I was incarcerated at 17 for assault with deadly weapon and gang allegations. I was charged as an adult, transferred to county jail. I didn't have any weapon. I didn't have any gang. I wasn't in a gang. I knew gang members, my best friends who I grew up with. That's what they did. The cop said I claimed the gang. He made it sound more reasonable by even giving me a moniker. It was crazy. The moniker was Slick, because I had slick back hair when I was 17. I was like, I had never heard that in my life, right? My public defender was phenomenal. Loved him, but back then it was just the cop's word against mine, against my teachers, my principals. And I got fitnessed up, got transferred to county jail. My parents thought, all right, if it's free, it can't be good. So they sold their life savings to give me a private lawyer who wasn't even a criminal lawyer. He was a personal injury lawyer. Of course, he didn't tell that to my parents. So facing the prospect of 15 years when I was 17, to plead guilty to something I didn't do or go to trial and know what was going to happen, because that cop was just going to testify to the same thing. I pled guilty to a strike. I still have a felony strike, and I refused to get it expunged. So from that point on, I knew this is what I wanted to do, because I saw how compelling it could be when it was all the resources of the government just against somebody that they've had in their crosshairs. Wound up going to college, went to UCLA locally, TIFF, wound up going to Berkeley Law. This is all I've ever wanted to do. I knew going into law school, I was going to be a PD. And if I may just add something a little off topic, I graduated during the recession, guys. So for our law students who are listening to this, I graduated in 2010. They called it the Great Recession. And the county also wasn't hiring. We had a hard hiring freeze. This was all I ever wanted to do. This is all I did in law school. I interned at the San Francisco PD's office every single semester, interned there every single semester, externed there every summer, but the office wasn't hiring. So I took a little detour. I went to big law for 2 years because it was easier getting a big law job back then than it was getting a government job. And as soon as it opened, I jumped right in, got hired. I've been doing this now for 8 years. And touching on Rachel said, it really is the most absolute privilege I've ever felt in my life. It's not just a job. It's not just a career to me. It really is a calling. It's something that you can look forward to going to work every single day, knowing that you made a difference in somebody's life, whether big or small. Knowing that you're fighting a system that's built to defeat them. Knowing that you're on the side of the underdog. If you're competitive, if you like to root for the underdog, this is the job. So that's how I wound up here. Took a little detour, but I'm glad I'm here. I've been here 8 years now. I'm assigned to downtown felonies. So, anything from simple car burglary to murder.
Thank you. I get chills whenever I hear your story. It's so powerful to me. So I'll tell you guys my story. First of all, I'm the recruitment coordinator for the office now. I started about 6 months ago. I've been in the office almost 18 years. It'll be 18 years in the fall. I grew up in, so my origin story is that I grew up in Inglewood, California during a time where mass incarceration was booming. This current moment is so triggering for me because I remember and I don't remember it from a television screen, friends. I remember it from being out in the streets with my friends and family, doing the not so popular protesting, AKA looting. I was 15 years old. I was extraordinarily impacted by over-policing. It was a time when they reduced the age to send children to adult court at 14. And so I saw my friends and families disappear from our communities, and we didn't know where they went. I not only saw them disappear into cages, I saw them disappear into caskets, because the murder rate in 1992 was the highest on record in Los Angeles. To give you some idea what that looks like, everyone talks about how terrible Chicago is. Everyone's bracing for the 4th of July weekend in Chicago because of the bloodbath. LA County, for example, I think Chicago had 300 murders last year. LA County, LA City during the 92 year had over 1,000. So 3 times Chicago and LA during my childhood, right? So I went to tons of gang funerals. I went to tons of, we used to go to the beach and pour out liquor and do all these things to memorialize the people that we lost. And no one really talked to us about what was happening in terms of mass incarceration. We were demonized. I call my generation the children of the crack epidemic, because so many of us were being raised by our grandmothers because our parents were addicted. And so we were each other's family. And, the people in power, both Democrats and Republicans, both Black politicians and white, demonized this generation of children. And they sent them into cages, and many of them are still there. So I had a choice, right? I mean, I could have gone down the path of many of my friends and family. I dated people who were in gangs. I dated people who were selling drugs. That was what we did in that community. We didn't have a lot of guidance or a lot of support from the systems that were supposed to be protecting us. So I chose education. I went to Inglewood High School. I went to Cal State Dominguez Hills. I'm a first generation college student, of course, first generation professional. And I was smart enough to, get into USC Law School, and that's where I started. And part of it, being a kid of a poor family, you want to do well. You want to make a ton of money. You want to buy your mama a house, right? That's what you kind of aspire to do once you reach that place. But for me, I had tremendous survivor's guilt. I wanted to go back for those who I had left behind. And I'd only left them behind mentally. Physically, I'm in the same zip code I was in when I was born, right? So I made a commitment to stay in my community, to live here, to buy a home here, to raise my children here. And unlike Rachel, my children, I'll show you a picture. My children, these 3 people, one is named Justice. The baby, her middle name is Grace. And the middle child, her name is Alexandria, which means defender of mankind. We pull no punches here, no cops, no DAs. My children know it is not optional, people. You are in the revolution, honey, it's in your DNA. I married a public defender who is now private attorney doing criminal defense and civil rights law. And so I made that decision to enter the office because I knew my community didn't trust public defenders. They called us public pretenders. They called us dump trucks. And I was committed to never be that, to provide them with excellent legal representation that they deserve. I was committed to appearing in court every day as if I was highly retained. My clients know that they have someone who will go to the ends of the earth for them, from giving them clothes for trial, to putting money on their books, to sending them books to their children, to buying their children Christmas gifts. I am committed to this work. It is a 24-hour job for me. It is not something, I tell my students who are in the summer clerk program, I am a recruiter. I am not a salesman. I will not try to sell you on this work. If you need to be sold, you're in the wrong office. This thing that you're seeking is seeking you. If you are among the crowd of people who are considering public defense, all I can tell you at this point is to move based on hope and not fear, right? Go into the direction of your grandest dreams, not away from your fears. So as a recruiter, I want to inspire students to enter this work if their heart is in it. We need that spirit of revolutionary spirit in this work, no matter what office you join. And so, yeah, so it was very organic for me to get into this work, defending the people who look like me. I grew up in an all Black and brown community that were over-policed and oppressed and failed by various systems in education, mental health, et cetera. And so I am honored to have entered the work 18 years ago, to still be doing it on the front lines. So yeah, and I'll open up the chat for any questions as well. Let me ask you on a lighter note, let me ask you guys, Rachel, what was your most, what's the best part of the work for you?
Ooh, the best part, I mean, it might be, it's different. It's different. There's like so many victories. One victory for one client is completely different from, you know, the victory for another client. Maybe for one client, it's getting the mental health diversion because you know in your heart of hearts that this person can barely grasp that they've been charged with a crime. For another client, it's a not guilty, like a righteous not guilty verdict where you took it through the whole thing and you finally got that closure for them. I would have to say, if I had to choose the best part of it, I mean, the people say that it's a thankless job. It's not always thankless, but when you get a thank you, like a real thank you from someone who looks you in your eyes and thanks you for seeing them and for believing them and for like fighting tooth and nail for them, that's better to me than a not guilty. That's better to me than any like material victory you can get in court. Like really raising hell for your client. And I mean, sometimes it's a dismissal. Begging and begging and begging for a dismissal and not taking no for an answer and not leaving your client's side when your client tells you, I'm not pleading to anything. I'm not guilty. This needs to be a dismissal or it's a trial. And then getting to the day of trial and having the prosecutor like look down at their paper and be like, we're gonna dismiss. Like, it's your conversation with your client afterwards that's the best part for them, because you feel like they're walking out like free. The weight is off their chest. They've cleared their name. But it's so hard to say what's the best part because there's so many little victories every single day that look completely different for every client. But yeah.
Jimmy, I'll give you the question as well, but someone asked in the chat, had you ever come across the people involved in your case again? The prosecutor, the DA, the cop, even your private lawyer?
The DA, yes. He is the supervisor of the floor I'm on for the DA's office, Mark Inaba.
Shut up.
Yeah, he was the DA that prosecuted me. You didn't know
Have
that?
you talked to him about it?
Nope, he has no idea who I am, and I don't think I have the tact to be able to talk to him professionally or cordially about it. So I've just dropped it.
Wow, okay.
The cop, I've never seen in court because I did follow up because when I was applying for moral character, I had to get all my old reports. So I did follow up on his career trajectory. When he interviewed me, he was a detective, and like most bad cops, he got promoted to, now he's a lieutenant, so I've never seen him in court. My PD passed away. My private lawyer, I haven't seen since.
Okay, what's the best part of the job for you?
I don't want to sound like an echo chamber, but it's exactly what Rachel just said, Tiff. It's that simple gratitude of having a client who has been voiceless their entire lives, and because of their financial or socioeconomic circumstances, don't really have anybody advocating for them. So when they just turn to thank you, say, hey, Mr. Chu, the way you fought for me, man, you know, I want to pay you, but I can't, or thank you. No one has ever stood up for me like that. No one has ever advocated for me like that. It's not a thankless job because something like that carries you for months, it carries you for years. So I think it's the gratitude of my clients. That's the best part of it.
For sure, for sure. I'll give you an example of, and I'll go to Rachel and Jimmy about the worst part of the job. For me, it is the same, it is exemplified in this one trial that I'll share with you. My client was a young Black man that I really bonded with over the couple of years that we were together. And he had been profiled as a gang member his entire life, from probably puberty on to the moment that I met him. And when I met this young man, he was at arraignment court, which is the first day in your court. He was wearing a Domino's pizza delivery uniform, right? They had arrested him at work. And so immediately I thought he had always maintained his innocence throughout our entire experience. He was charged with attempted murder and various allegations, which would give him a life sentence 4 or 5 times over. He was 25 years old or 26 years old. We're fast forward to the day of trial. We had already agreed we would not take any deal. So we were not in negotiations at all. But the DAs knew they had some problems with their case. So they came to me with an offer of 10 years. And 10 years or a life sentence is a heavy question. But for me, I was so convinced of his innocence, it was not a hard thing for me to advise him not to accept it. But he paused, and which kind of shook me, like, wait a minute, I thought we had a plan. Then he started to express his fears that these people, and the jury was already in the hallway, the veneer, meaning the 100 people that were called to be questioned for voir dire. And so he'd already seen some of them in court, and he said, they're going to wash me up, Tiff. You're going to wash me up. I'm not going to win. I don't want to go to trial. And I go, let you sleep on it. Now, over the couple of years that we had this relationship, I met his mother, his grandmother, all of his sisters, various girlfriends. I had never met his brother. His brother was his twin, had been in prison since he was 16. His brother gets released right before trial. And so he hadn't seen his brother in a decade, his twin, because he had a juvenile record. They wouldn't let him visit him in prison. In any event, the brother asked the judge, Your Honor, can I hug my brother? I haven't seen him in 10 years. There's this moment where they embrace, and I'm tearing up even thinking about it, because it is clear that they both love each other so much and had been apart. And so fast forward to the next morning, my client's like, I'm taking the deal, Tiff. I go, no, you're not taking the deal. No. And he expressed to me with tears in his eyes how afraid he was. And so then I told his mother, this is what's going to happen. She was like, what? Why? We go up before the court. The court goes through the oral waivers. We have a right to have a trial, sir, blah, blah, blah. He said, yes. I'm feeling sick to my stomach, right? That this man is about to go to prison for 10 years for a crime he didn't commit because he has no faith in our system. And in that moment, the judge looks over and he says, you know what? I want him to do a written waiver. Go in the back with him and do the written waiver. The mom stands up and says, Your Honor, can I go with him? Never happens, but just said, sure. She goes in the back with me. Her and him have a moment through the glass and their hands on the glass, and she's saying, do you believe in Tiffany? He's like, yeah. Do you believe she'll fight for you? He goes, yeah. She said to fight. Go fight. He looks at me with tears, tattooed face, tears running down his face, and says, I'm rolling with you, Tiff. And I literally wanted to vomit. I wanted to throw up right there because God forbid we lose and this man goes to prison for the rest of his life because he relied on me. So I go out there and the brother is learning that we're going forward. He tried to confront me. I'm like, chill out, dude, the jury's around. So we go upstairs, he goes, what would you do if that was your brother? It's because of you, he'll get life in prison. They're gonna wash him up, we're gonna lose. And I go, I would do the same thing. It was my brother. So we go back in court, the trial resumes, things happen. I get so sick at one point that I cannot stand to cross the victim because my back is killing me. Like I literally can't stand to do my cross. At the end of the case, the jury has a question. I don't recall the question. It was stupid, but they had one. And I'm pacing like, geez, what is the question about? And the bailiff winks at me. The bailiffs are in charge of the jury. They follow them in the back. They give them lunch. They kind of ask questions or whatever. So I'm like, So I say, we answer the question. We go in the hallway. And she goes, don't go far. So I sit in the hallway with his mother and his sisters, and I'm talking to them. She comes back in, they have a verdict. And I sit there, and when you have a verdict in criminal court, in felony court anyway, they surround you, the bailiffs. They call back up, it's like 4 or 5 of them, and they surround your client in case he kind of flips. So I'm standing there, and his hands are shaking, and I'm holding him. And then I look at the judge, I look at the DA, the clerk as she's reading, and I look at him and I go, it's a Tuesday. I go, Taco Tuesday's on you. And he smiles, and then they read the verdicts, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not. And he just starts to bawl, and his family is like applauding. It's like 20 of them in the audience. And that is the best moment in the world. Like literally, you manage every now and again in this work to save a life. And it is glorious. There is nothing, maybe the birth of those children, but second to that, there's nothing higher than that moment where you have just secured the release of a human being who was one step away from prison forever. On top of that, when they got home, they took a video of them partying, the brothers celebrating together, and the mom sent it to me. And a year ago, Plumber sent me a picture of his baby. Because of our relationship and our experience, another human being is on this earth that would not be here were it not for that experience. You don't get much better than that. Not in any other job, not in any other law that you can practice where that kind of thing happens. And you know you made, at the end of my life, I'll know that the community is better because of my work. Rachel, what is your worst part of your job? Worst part of the work?
How can I follow up on that, Tiffany? No, I listen, this is just a little perspective on like the felony practice. When you're in the big leagues, like Jimmy and Tiffany, I'm in the misdemeanor practice. I haven't graduated from that yet. I'm 2 years into this job. The worst feeling, I don't think that there is a worse feeling physically or mentally than you watching the verdict go from the jury's hands to the clerk's hands, to the judge's hands, back to the clerk's hands for her to read it. There's something, the tension and it's palpable. Like you're so worried about this person. It doesn't matter how bad the evidence was or good it was. You are handing over your client to a jury each and every time you try a case. So I would say worst feeling is not knowing what the verdict is going to be. Another kind of a side note, and I think that this ties into, you know, the questions about Jackie Lacey and the questions about reform and collaboration. I think that the worst possible feeling that I've felt in my misdemeanor practice is seeing someone who's mentally ill and forgotten because they're mentally ill. A mentally ill person who is not placeable. They can't go home. They can't go back to the program that they broke a window at. They can't go, they don't have a place to go. And actually like seeing a young person who isn't receiving the treatment, the mental health treatment that they need, the real collaborative treatment and holistic treatment that they need, being swallowed up by the system, and you're seeing it in your misdemeanor practice, and knowing that in a couple years, if this keeps up, if this person doesn't get the services that they need, they're going to be represented by Miss Blacknell. They're going to be represented by Mr. Chu. They're going to be just seeing the progression of it, seeing the generational trauma seep in, to seeing an 18-year-old, this arbitrary line where the day that you turn 18, now you're being charged as an adult. And now that record that you have is forever. So the absolute worst feeling, apart from, you know, the trials and tribulations of an actual jury trial, are seeing the generational trauma of mass incarceration and a failure on the part of our government, local and on the macro, forgetting people and letting people get swallowed up by the system. I think that is a pit in your stomach that can't be duplicated either. So that's just my misdemeanor practice perspective.
Jimmy, what do you think? Worst part?
Definitely agree with Rachel. So let me switch it up though. I think for me, it's the emotional weight that you carry with you. It's not all rainbows and butterflies, guys. I'm not here to bullshit you. Just like Tiff said, she's not here to sell you on anything. If you guys want to join our office, we'd love for you to be here if you're a true fighter. But it's not always gravy. Going from the firm to here, I mean, you don't go home after work at the firm and think about, oh my God, is the litigation on this oil company pipeline gonna be okay? You don't wake up in the middle of the night with sweat. You know, you don't have sleepless nights. You don't think about your clients and their families and their well-beings. It's just, you know, it's something you carry with you. Now, this is a government job. You cannot care and skate and have great pay and great benefits and great colleagues. You can. I mean, that's just the truth, but you're going to be a horrible public defender. I think to be effective, they tell you to stay objective, right? But that's impossible. These clients of yours become your friends. Some of them become your family members. Some of them I still keep in touch with, even after court. And to be effective is to be able to empathize, but to be able to empathize is to carry that with you. So what Mr. Garcia touched on a little bit is just having that mental break, you know, having that space, right? Tiff's got her family, she's got her hobbies, her activism. For me, and that kind of ties into what Rachel was saying earlier, is, guys, I'm an adrenaline junkie. You know, I dived with sharks. I camped out in the Serengeti with lions. I drove across Baja, Mexico after my last murder trial by myself for 13 days, just diving and eating tacos. Nothing in the world beats the adrenaline rush of a trial, executing, preparing, strategizing, and then hearing that not guilty with your client next to you. There's no better feeling. I don't have kids, so for me that is number one. It's number two for Tiff. It's an addiction. I mean, you can never get enough, because not only is it fun for us as lawyers, but you're making a difference. And if you're competitive, it's the ultimate thrill, right? All the resources of the government, of the police, against you and your client. That's it. That's it. So it's pretty awesome, and you can't buy it with any amount of money.
I remember being in juvenile. I did juvenile in Watts many years ago, and then I came back and did juvenile in Inglewood as a supervisor a couple of years ago, between the last two children. And as a mother, it was different for me going back to juvenile, because I saw little brown kids from my city, right, who went to the schools that I went to too. It was so triggering for me to be there. And I remember this one little girl who was in custody for like theft, something stupid she shouldn't be in jail for. And I learned her story, which was that she was raped by her uncle. Her father interrupted it, ended up almost killing the uncle. And then he went to prison, and now she's like a foster child. And she's in jail, right? She has all this trauma upon trauma. And she was so young. I think she was 12 or 13. And I was so overcome with emotion because I couldn't get her out. I didn't know, I wanted to adopt her on the spot. And I went back to the office and I talked to a senior lawyer in the office, and I'm like crying at my desk saying, where is God? Where is God in all of this? Why did this happen to this child? Why can't someone save her? And it was a hard day at work. And then my colleagues can commiserate with you. They'll support you. That's the best part of our office, is that we're so close. It's an incestuous bunch. Many of us are married to each other. It's a mess. But when the divorce happens, it's a mess. The next day, I'm in the building, and in walks a young man holding a carrier. And in the moment he saw me, I saw him. He goes, Tiffany? And I go, Diego? And Diego was my first murder client back in Watts when I was in juvenile. And this young man was accused of killing this Black young man for no other reason than that he was a Black dude in a white t-shirt. And that represented a challenge for me initially. But knowing what I know about politics, about gang politics, about the hood, about Black and brown folk, I knew it wasn't true racism. It was more gang issues. So we developed a bond. And that young man, I was fortunate enough to secure his freedom to not go to adult court, to keep him in juvenile court, even though it was a first-degree murder and he was a shooter. So literally, I hadn't seen that man since he was 17, since our case. It had been about 10 years. And there he was before me, immediately recognized me, got off the elevator with me and said, you saved my life. I was so lost. I was so stupid. I was in gangs, and you saw something in me. And all the guys in my unit in juvenile hall, all of them got life but me. And I don't know why you helped me, but you're an angel. And I really want to thank you. And I was like, oh my God, like literally for the next 10 days, I'm like fluttering it's literally the most exhilarating thing to see a person. He was married. He had 3 children. He had a house. Like literally he's understood the harm that he caused, totally reformed, on the right side of things, and saw the error of his ways, and had the presence of mind to acknowledge how much I worked for him. So I go back to my office and I tell my same colleague that story. She goes, there's God. That was his way of pushing you forward. That we have dark days, but we have some great ones too. And the great ones are so great that you realize that because you lived, someone else lived easier, or someone else got to have something that they wouldn't have had. And so that was my worst moment, crying about that small girl who was in so much trouble, but then it was rewarded by something else. And I was encouraged to move forward and to continue the work. And that's what happens. How am I on time, guys? Cooper? I don't want to take any more.
We are over time now, but I mean, this is really fascinating. I think everybody is really loving it. So I'm not going to stop you if you want to wrap up with more with the questions in the chat and such.
If you guys want to, I know you guys might have to go, so let me know, Rachel and Jimmy. Let me see.
I have a meeting. I'm meeting a client right now to watch a video with him, but Tiffany, do you mind if I address some of the questions in the?
Oh, not at all. Go ahead.
Because I just figured, like, I'm a Pepperdine grad and I clerked for the office twice. I did a rotation, my 2L year, and then I did my post-bar clerkship at the public defender's office. The question was, for clerking, do you recommend working for an office that does juvenile and then another office that does adult defense? If you're talking about within the public defender's office, I think they may make you do it. Tiffany, you tell me. Are we having them do a juvenile rotation as well as an adult rotation in their clerkships?
No, we don't force them. When you're hired, you get a list of potential offices. We have 32 locations, some juvenile, some adult, mental health, immigration. So you can select the ones you're interested in, and I try to give you one or both of each. But because we're remote this summer, it's a different experience. Good, better in some ways, not so good in other ways. But in a general clerkship, you do have an opportunity to see two sides of things if you so choose.
Okay, so it's the same as when I did it. I did juvenile and that was a wild ride. I had no clue what was going on in juvenile detention centers or camps, as they so aptly call them. So I would definitely recommend that to anybody. I can't wait for my juvenile rotation, which hopefully happens after my misdemeanor rotation. And then I'm just going to answer this question about caseloads, and then I'm going to bow out, but I'm going to put my info for anyone who has any questions for me or the clerk program or anything. Obviously you can reach out to Tiffany, but I'll make myself available as well since I did it. But regarding the caseloads, before COVID hit, I had about 65 open cases, and now it's down to about 35. So that means that those are all just cases that are awaiting trial, right? Or awaiting a resolution. And then I have, I don't know if it's hundreds or somewhere between 100 and 200 post-conviction cases that I'm dealing with. I don't think it's a secret that our caseloads are overwhelming. I don't think it's a secret that public defenders are overworked. But in my circle and in my branch, there's no excuse. There's really no excuse for anything less than that, every stone unturned for that client. And I think that even though it's overwhelming at times, I think that the resilient public defenders and ones who are really down to fight and work always find a way to do everything necessary for that client. So it totally is, it's overwhelming, of course. It would be overwhelming if you had a handful of clients and you're dealing with this type of work and this type of trauma that your clients are dealing with every day, and trying to take that on and move them in a direction where they need to go and advocate for them. But I would say the caseloads are, I think massive would be a fair term, and you got to give each client adequate attention. Otherwise, what are you doing? So you just got to, try your best, and sometimes that means triage. Sometimes that means I have to put my files in a dated stack and move through them, but you got to get through them. So I'm going to put my info in the chat. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Jimmy. And you guys, I'm so excited for you. And this is a weird time, but if you want to join this office, it's the office to join. So thank you so much.
Tiff, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, I've got a video conference right now too. Do you have any final question?
Anyone have any questions for Jimmy before he goes? Okay.
I'm gonna leave my email, so if anybody does, feel free to contact me. Any questions about the work, about law school? If anyone has any moral character issues, I'm the executive board member. We have a new bar association. It's called the System Involved Bar Association. So if you've been involved with the system or are trying to navigate it, that's what we do. So any questions, feel free to email me. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for taking your lunchtime. and I'll leave you in the capable hands of Tiff now, all right? I'm going to leave my email in the chat right now. Thank you, guys. Be well. Good luck.
Just one note about the caseloads. I think that the media does a bad job of sort of painting the picture of how horrendous it is, and some of the movies that we've seen imply that we have thousands of cases, and that's just simply not the case. LA County is a different category. Like if you guys want, I can send you guys our salary chart. So we make way more than everyone else in public defense, primarily. Maybe San Fran is higher, but the cost of living is higher. But across the country, for sure, it's not even close to what our salaries are. We have paralegals, we have social workers, we have secretaries, we have investigators, we have a full running office. It's not, the poor girl on the one show, Gideon's Promise, who's like in there with quarters trying to collect money to buy gas. Like, that's not our reality. When I transferred from felony trials to this assignment, I had maybe 23 cases. Right, that's it. So and sure, I mean, one was a capital case and one was another murder and kidnapping, but they're serious because I am a grade 4. I'm a capital litigator, so I'm like, my levels are higher, my cases are lower. And for the death penalty cases, for example, if you have a death case, a real true case, they're seeking death, you have no other cases. They take all your cases away. They put 2 lawyers on the case, you work it up for like 4 or 5 years, and you do everything you can. And we're able to appoint doctors and appoint DNA experts, appoint cell tower experts. So we have that sort of capability. The court pays for it. So LA is like the Beverly Hills of public defense, in my opinion. It's given what we pay for our lawyers, as well as how much support we have. So with that, I mean, I understand it's a high caseload from private defense maybe, but within the area of public defense or even public interest work, we make more and have more to work with. So yeah, that's all I have, unless you guys have any questions. I really appreciate your time in getting to talk to you guys. I think I'm hosting 76 law clerks this summer. It's sort of madness, but it's so much fun getting to talk to people who are at your stage, because there's so much optimism and so much energy, and especially now with BLM and like COVID, and it's just an exciting time to be a part of something that's meaningful. And I welcome you guys. And if anyone wants to apply for fall or spring, fall will likely be remote as well. But we don't know about spring, but you can send me your resumes and your cover letter and I'll contact you, since I'm the person to contact. Okay.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Cooper, sorry. Do you recommend doing any like law school typical things, whether it be law review, trial, moot court, clinics, anything like that? Just because I know a lot of us are choosing our schedules for the fall and spring. So I just wanted to see what any advice you have on that. And I'm excited to join you in the fall.
Yeah, I remember you from Spring OCI. So I would say criminal procedure, obviously, criminal law, con law, maybe trial ad if you want. We teach you everything you need to know. When I was in law school, I didn't do law review. I didn't do moot court. Once I got to the PD's office, I knew I was home. And so I didn't compete in the ways that law school kind of forces you to compete. I didn't feel very welcomed in the law school atmosphere. I felt very othered at USC. And so I just wanted to get the hell out of there. Give me my JD and let me go about my life. And that's what I did. So I didn't participate in any of those extracurriculars. And I don't regard it higher than anything else. I am looking for your why. Your why are you here? Why are you with us? What do you want to do with your life? That's more important to me than any grade or any ranking or any extracurricular. It is good to have some trial ad. I think it makes you comfortable speaking in front of people. But if you don't, we have a full training program that teaches you all that you need to know. You do all sorts of mock everything when you hire. Mock closing, mock opening, mock voir dire. The training team is pretty robust. So you'll have what you need when you start the office. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Okay.
Well, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. It was really fascinating to hear from all of you, and all of your stories are incredible.
Thank you.
And we hope that we can maybe host you again sometime in the future, because
Yeah.
I think, I think hopefully things will be in person again at some point in the future. And I know we'd love to have you all come to campus.
Yeah, I love to be there. Just let me know. It's what I
Great.
do.
Well, thank you so much. I'll go ahead and end the meeting now. And yeah, have a great day, everyone.
You too.
Thank you.